All righty, welcome everybody to today's Torah study with Rabbi Richie Address. And it is Shabbat, March 9th. And I'm in a somewhat noisy place, so I will keep myself muted, but let's go ahead and begin the show. Rabbi, if you'd like to, well, actually, why don't we, I think we know everybody, so I don't think we need to. Yep. Rabbi, if you want to take it, please do. Thanks. Thank you all for being here, everybody. Appreciate it very much. Hi, Sarani. Good to see you.
Okay, everybody,
all.
wherever you are, or spread out all over across wherever you may be, Shabbat Shalom, and good morning to where you are. It's afternoon here, and where I am, so that's okay. It's even before we mess around with the clocks tonight. So, yeah. So, hopefully, all of you had a chance to read ahead, because this is a somewhat a bizarre Torah portion. But first, as is tradition, we do the bracha, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. That word la'asok, again, to ask the text to speak to us. And this is a very interesting Torah portion that asks the text to speak to us, because the bulk of this Torah portion, as you know, if you've read, has to do with, again, the very, very detailed description of the last couple of Torah portions of the temple. Like a lot of these passages, especially here that we're in the middle of, these are rereadings back into history of the Solomonic temple, no doubt, with a rather elaborate construction. Certainly not for the wanderings in the wilderness. And the Torah does this. The Torah is like this, as you know, as you probably, I don't know who did Torah study last week, but most likely spent some time also on the golden calf and the reference to the fact of back in 2 Kings that this passage was probably written as a response to the civil war between the north and the south, Israel and Judea, and Jeroboam setting up calf gods at the sanctuaries in the northern, which is detailed in the book of 2 Kings. So a lot of this historical stuff is fascinating, and Vayikachel is part of that phenomenon. But there's a couple other things I want to raise with you and the questions that were sent out with the picture of somebody, not me, but I think it was, it looks like Harry Rosenfeld from his before picture, before retirement. Anyway,
It
so
was something.
Yeah. No. He looks very, very rabbinic, much more rabbinic than I am. But Harry's a good guy, and I'm glad you made a connection with him. If you connect with him again, tell him I said hi. So,
Thank you.
so Vayikachel or Vayakachel, depending on which part of the country you happen to live in and how your Hebrew is, from the root kahal, which means kahila, bringing together. And so a lot of times, and I hope some of you have your translations with you, in the Plaut translation, it's and Moses convoked, which is a fairly, I don't know anybody who walks around where I live in Jersey saying, I like to convoke. Usually it's, yo, you want to have a meeting, and which is also a good translation of that word. There's a couple of things here that are very interesting once we get off the construction. First of all, this is, again, a couple of Torah portions in the middle is elaborate construction, but before the text goes back into construction, what's the first thing that Moses reminds the people of? And that is Shabbat. So I'm going to ask you, why? Why in the middle of all these chapters that deal with an elaborate construction of the Mishkan and the Ark and the ephod and all this other very, really elaborate stuff, he throws in 3 or 4 verses that remind you Shabbat? Why? What's that doing here? Doesn't belong here. What's it doing here? And now let your mind just free associate with it. What's the other, what's one of the spiritual messages that this text is trying to teach us, especially relevant in today's world? Randy is, oh, no. That's my cursor was floating. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to why Shabbat? Yashim, Bavakasha. Unmute.
Yep. So I think here Shabbat refers to the need to take time out and to think about the spiritual meaning of our lives and our life, and to have a communion, to have a meeting with God and God's message to us.
Okay, so absolutely, that's the classic interpretation of this now. And you're right. Play with this. You're preaching this to a congregation this morning. You're the rabbi of a congregation. You want to send a message about this concept of Shabbat. In the year 2024, in the United States American Jewish community. Why is it so important, Yashim?
Is to take a step back and to reflect on who we are and our covenant with God and the importance of taking time off. I mean, I don't know if you're also referring to the need for understanding of the need for a ceasefire at this point politically too. I don't know.
I'm sure that will come up. I want to stay off the political right now.
Okay.
And just focus, but just focus on the spiritual. How many, according to Dr. Zoom, there's 10 screens. How many of you observe Shabbat on Friday night to Saturday night? How many of you do that? Raise your hand. Don't be afraid. Nothing's going to happen to you. The lightning will not strike. Yeah, go ahead, Yashim.
Well, I light the candles and I pray, but I'm not really taking time off the way a Chabad rabbi would counsel.
Oh, okay. But so who else had their hand up? Michael?
Yes, I did.
You're ghost-like on my screen. You're all white. I mean, you should
It's
get out.
I got a lot of backlight behind me. I'm in my garden room, and
oh, I thought maybe you need to get out in the sun a little bit, but okay, Michael. So talk to me about. Go ahead.
Shabbat. Before all of these lovely blueprinted instructions on how to build the tabernacle, I do believe that this is here to remind everybody to keep the Sabbath day holy, because you're about to take on a holy endeavor, a dwelling for the Lord, so to speak. So I believe that he mentions this first to remind everybody of something that was being established as a tradition. Keeping the Sabbath day holy. Go out and work 6 days, but hey, on the seventh day, we got to take a break. That's how I interpret it.
No. First of all, there's no right or wrong. I mean, there is no right or wrong on the beauty of Torah study is the text speaks to each one of us in our own life experience. Who else had it? Saroni, did you have your hand up or not?
I didn't have my hand up, but I'm wondering if I might. Do you want to keep going with working with people who do actually keep Shabbats?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I acknowledge that Shabbat, but I definitely don't keep Shabbat. But I guess I was going to draw that distinction that I've heard that some people say that you could rest on the Shabbat so that you can work harder during the week. They're talking a lot about work, but I think maybe this is an admonishment that you're not working just so that you can rest on Shabbat. Shabbat, to Yashim's point also, is that it is to be kept separate. It is to make sure you keep the holiness of the Shabbat, not just so that you can work harder during the week and make more money and all of the other allusions to the different things that go into the work. So I would just probably second what Yashim was saying about the distinction between work and Shabbat, if that makes sense.
No. It makes perfect sense. I raise this only because as we as an American Jewish community change, and we're in the midst of rapid change. We talked about this before. We're literally creating a new American Judaism. And the majority of it is non-Orthodox. 85 to 90% of the community is non-Orthodox. So we struggle with verses like this and in the commandments of keeping the Sabbath day because it's holy. On the sixth day, seventh day, in the first story of creation, God rests. How come we don't? How come we don't? And in the work that I do in my program of Jewish Sacred Aging, I just got back from speaking at a conference in Milwaukee on this. And again, this came up. Didn't come up on the Torah portion because it was at an Episcopal church sponsored conference. But it came up in the context of as we get older and become more aware of our own mortality, and we become more aware that we don't need more material things to give us satisfaction. We become more aware of the need to sometimes say, time out. I need to just be. I need to just focus and collect those spiritual moments, to use that phrase, because they have become and are becoming more important. So the majority of the Jewish community in the United States, I'm going to say the majority of Jews in the world, do not observe Shabbat. They observe it in name only. Sometimes, if we're lucky, they'll light candles and say the brachot on Friday night and have some sort of quiet time as opposed to everybody running around. But if you allow that concept of Shabbat to just play with us as we get older, and the need for refreshment, spiritual refreshment, that's one of the things that I'm becoming more and more, and it came up in this workshop that I did on Thursday, more and more important. And this is why I think in the middle of these construction commandments, the placing of a verse or two about, whoa, time out. All this stuff is really important. But it's all material. There's another level of reality, especially as we get older, called the spiritual. And you need to take time for that. Because we understand that it becomes more important. We don't need more stuff. I mean, there are people who need more stuff. For those of us a certain age, you may remember when we were kids, there were bumper stickers. They don't do bumper stickers too much anymore. And one of them was, he who dies with the most toys wins, which is very, very American. Okay. But this concept of Shabbat, and last month, we were talking a little bit about, I forget who is, Randy, are you from Pittsburgh? Randy is muted.
Randy's my
No.
brother. He was from Raton and now he lives in Albuquerque.
Okay, so
No, that was a guy, Peter, I believe.
Okay, he was on the call last month.
Right.
And he
Rabbi in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And he was channeling one of our professors, Dr. Reines, who came up with this concept of polydoxy. And I remember when he did this lesson at school, it was really kind of cool. But his idea of Shabbat was, given the American environment of materialism, it's very difficult for people, especially who are working, to take Saturday off. So if you can take Shabbat Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday night, that's fine. That's your Shabbat. And I do know people who actually practice that without calling it, polydoxy. They say, I have colleagues who, they work on Shabbat, quote unquote. So they take a day off on like Thursday or Tuesday, and that becomes their Shabbat. And there is a small movement, not going very well, that at least we should on Friday night to Saturday night. You see this machine here? Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Friday night to Saturday night, no electronics. Now, if you, of course, if you want to zoom into Torah study, that's another story. But you know what I mean. You're not living on the internet. You're not living on your phone. You're not living on the electronics. That, I think, is something that the American Jewish community can really get behind. But this idea of the spiritual Shabbat, everybody needs it. So the growth, we just did a podcast on Secrets of Meaning on meditation. How many of you anybody meditate? Okay. I will submit to you that if you sit quietly 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day as you meditate, whenever you do that, morning, evening, night, whatever, that's literally a spiritual Shabbat. Because what are you doing when you meditate? You just shut out everything else, right? You focus on your breath. You focus on the moment. Those of you who read your John Kabat-Zinn, the moment. And it's like a spiritual Shabbat. So I raise this with you because it's kind of cool to just play with this idea of Shabbat and getting off the literal 6 days, 7 days, etc., etc. Okay, any comments, questions?
There was one other person who had his hand up.
Okay,
The
okay.
observed Shabbat.
Who is that?
Christo Cheney.
Christo from Lubbock, Texas. How y'all doing?
Wind blown.
No, listen, be careful. You're not a Cowboys fan, are you? I hope.
I'm not a sports fan at all. I'm a book addict.
Oh, well, I'm a book addict too, but you can be both because anyway, go ahead. But be careful of those fires because
Only if you're in Jersey.
that's true.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about with why does it start out with Shabbat? They had just been rescued from slavery in Egypt. When did they have a day off to rest and reflect on life? I mean, it's not exactly like they had something called a workers' union. They didn't even have a paycheck. They just got fed and that's it.
Right. And the Shabbat idea, and there are people who link commentators who do link that from slavery into, because the whole wilderness experience is worthy of an adult education class in itself. Forget the text, but what does the wilderness experience represent? What is it symbolic of? It's symbolic basically of all of our lives. So hold on for 1 second. Okay, sorry guys. The wilderness experience itself is many of us see as a metaphor for our entire existence. From the birth, there's the midrash about coming through the Red Sea is symbolic of the birth canal and giving birth. So the children of the Israelites get born as they go through the Sea of Reeds, and they are the struggles, the back and forth and the back and forth, very much like life, never really reaching the promised land. And the concept of legacy, of making sure that we create the means for the next generation to carry on, which is basically the book of Deuteronomy and the 3 farewell sermons of Moses. So all of this is the symbolic nature of this stuff is again, as we said a couple of times before, once you get off the literalness of the Torah, it expands, it just blossoms into the possibilities of interpretation, very, very personal. The texts are very personal, extremely personal. That's why Torah study is so powerfully wonderful, because this stuff is real personal. Anything else? Yes, Donna by the river.
Yes, Donna by the river. Oh yeah, another thing too with my friends in Israel, they find a support when you give Shabbat on their behalf, or if you're having a Shabbat remembering the ones who've been taken hostage, and I get written back to me about saying thanks so much for doing that for us, and so that kind of connects us all together and helps
Well,
us support each other.
well, the connection, and I'm glad you raised that sense of connection, because again, as we said, I think before you tuned in, even the first word of the Torah portion, Vayikachal, has kahal as the root, which means community. There's a lot of synagogues have kahal in it, Kehilat Chesed, Kehilat Kadosha, the congregation in Charleston, a sacred community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea of lighting and the Friday night experience, as you alluded to, the fact that when you sit down Friday night or stand up Friday night, depending on your custom, and light the candles and say the blessings over wine and the bread, you are literally being linked to millions of other Jews doing this at the same time, right before dinner or at sunset, all over the world. All over the world. And this is this is not the subject for today, but when we do the workshop on new rituals, we talk a little bit about this. But the power of ritual and the power of what you're doing being shared by millions of other people at the same time does link you. And that's very, very important, because Judaism ultimately is a religious civilization that's based upon community. You can't be Jewish alone. You can't be Jewish. You can try to be Jewish, but you need the community. Community is absolutely essential in being Jewish. Next thing I want to raise with you, just clear your minds. So the bulk of this Torah portion is the construction, and they even bring in the guy who gets named the project manager, because to build a temple is a big deal, and you have to have a project manager, and his name is Bitzalel, in the shadow ale of God, and the text says God basically is chosen, raised him up. So I want you to think about this idea of construction. Okay, this is a very, very. Any of you in construction or know how to build something? Because I don't. You know, I do it. I call somebody and can you build this? And okay, Neil, you understand construction?
I do.
Okay.
I don't do so much lately, but I do understand it.
Okay, so when you read this Torah portion, if you read ahead, or even if you didn't, to build something, you have to have what a good foundation, and the construction being solid, etc., or the whole thing crumbles.
Right, exactly.
So what are the things I like to explore with you, because I find this very, very interesting, is if you take this idea of the Mishkan, the construction, and personalize it, and have us, you and me are each our own Mishkan, and we are, by the way, and there's commentaries to that. We're each our own, in essence, temple. And so the foundation of who we are and who we've all become is really, in many ways, based upon the foundations that we've been lucky enough to have. Some people do not have those foundations. And you know what happens. So here's what I'm asking you. I want you to play with this idea. This is really cool out of the Torah portion. Who or what in your life, looking back, were the people or events or things that allowed you to be who you are now? Who were those teachers or mentors? Who were those, or what were those events that really shaped you to make you the Mishkan that you are now? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Look back.
My parents.
How many of you would say your parents, or one or both of your parents, if you're lucky to have. Okay. Anybody else looking back?
My little Jewish community, and this is Ron Rubin, in
Yeah.
Trinidad, Colorado, we had a very small congregation, but we had maybe a dozen, and the people there who were primarily in their 70s and 80s or older, they had a huge impact on my values, my everyday living, and a couple of teachers in school, but it was primarily parents and the Jewish, our very small Jewish community, I would say.
So talk to me about that a little bit, Ron, because there's some people who come from large communities, with a wealth of resources and this, that, and the other thing. But I have also found in my travels when I was a regional director for the union for the Reform movement, and I would visit all my little small congregations in Western Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia and some of these places. The people there would say the same thing that you did. They didn't have the JCC, they didn't have the Jewish Family Service, they didn't have the mega synagogues with the beautiful cathedral buildings and all this other cockamamie. Cockamamie is a Talmudic term. It's often untranslated. But what was it, Ron, about? Was it the people? Was it the way they lived? Was it because again, it goes back to the power of community. What was? Go ahead.
Well, they lived. It was again. I have to reiterate that it was a very small Jewish community. There were maybe, and Randy can speak to this as well. There were maybe 5 or 6 couples who we would have dinner at their houses. We'd have Shabbat services very occasionally, and then we had our bar mitzvahs there. But they were just special. They instilled in me a sense of gentleness and right from wrong, just by their actions. So it was a very small Jewish community, and when we were in school in Raton, New Mexico, it was a very ethnically diverse group, and I had very good friends, and the teachers were good too, but it just didn't have that same significance as these older Jewish people, and they were old. When our bar mitzvahs happened, they were in their, what, Randy, 70s and 80s. Many of them lived to be 100, but they were quite old. But it was that maybe also that added to the gravitas of what life should be.
No, thank you. It's fascinating to me that the way for about 15 years while I was the director of the region before I went up to New York, I moonlighted at a little congregation like Trinidad, by the way, an immigrant congregation in southern New Jersey that was never more than 60, 70, 80 member units. But it was a building very much like the Trinidad building that you couldn't reproduce today in any way, shape, or form. And it was a community that was started over 100 years ago by the De Hirsch people out of Germany who would bring Jews over and make them farmers. So the South Jersey area, the egg farmers, dairy farmers, et cetera, et cetera. This is a congregation that they started. And they're still, I was just talking to somebody this morning who is probably going to be their new rabbi. They're still passionately dedicated because of the building, because of this, just like you guys are. And the history, even though there are no kids left, there's nobody moving there at all. There's nothing for them to do. Anybody else? Who yeah, Saroni. Am I pronouncing that right?
You got it. Yep, it's Sarony. Thank you.
Saroni. Where are you located at right now?
I am in Monument, Colorado. So just
Monument.
a couple of hours north of Temple Aaron in Trinidad.
Okay.
And maybe we can table this, but I'm just wondering, the community has been created in this parsha. There's a tremendous amount of talk about all that went into the creation. And then poor Moses again isn't allowed to enter the tent of meeting because the presence has come in. So not only is he, I'm wondering if, I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but I just found that my heart went out to him that he just did all of this work and then wasn't allowed to go in. Similarly, he wasn't allowed to go into the land of Israel. So what meaning can we take from that, of that he just went through all of the fakakta rigmarole, like you were talking about, of creating all of this, and then he's not allowed to enter and to feel that presence of that it came into the tent of meeting.
1 2 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. Did I freeze or did you freeze?
We did not freeze.
Okay. So
Serenity was going, so you may
Okay.
have, sorry.
no,
Rob.
I got it. Okay. Sarni, the issue that you raise is a powerful, personal, human question. It's one of the why questions. It's one of the questions. That's why I think when you take a look at the Torah as metaphor, it's extremely personal. Because Moses, with all this, you're right, with all this responsibility, doesn't get what he wants. Because all he wants to do is go into the promised land. Okay. It's like saying to God, listen, I worked hard for this. I schlepped these people. They're not a group of easy, they're not easy. And I did it. And now, no, just because I goofed up once, not fair. This is a lesson. This is a life lesson that most of us don't want to learn. Sometimes the answer is no. We don't like it. Sometimes the answer is no. And the challenge, and this is especially as we get older, is having to deal sometimes when the answer is no. And so you open up one of the great conundrums and challenges of being a human being. We need, and sometimes we can't. And so the challenge is how to learn to deal with the stuff that doesn't work out. Some people can do that. Given probably some of you have dealt with people who are dealing with significant illnesses, or perhaps a suddenness of a death, or real disappointment, the breakup of a relationship, their hopes and dreams not fulfilled. Some people deal with it by saying, this is part of life. I have to move on and I have to learn from this. I can't change. And some people give up and they crawl into a little shell and they say, life is not fair. I'm the victim. Oh, woe is me. Now, the reason why different people do different things, there's a whole theory about that. I'll get into it if you want to. But I think this is part of the metaphorical, symbolic nature of the Torah. That we're here for a very, very brief amount of time. Really. The blink of an eye, the snap of a finger, when you take a look at the grand scheme of the universe. And sometimes the answer is no. No, you can't do that. Or no, it's not going to work. Parents who have hopes and dreams and fantasies for their children, and the children grow up and they don't meet those hopes and dreams and fantasies? No matter how hard, they may have done everything right, the parents. There are certain things in life we can control, and certain things like the Unatana Tokef on the high holidays, which is the most important prayer of the holidays, There are certain things we can't control. It's easy to accept when we win, when we get what we want. But sometimes, as even great literature, and the Torah is great literature, says, how are you going to deal when the answer is no? And so this is part of life. Moses, and there have been books, articles, things on Moses's life being dissected, sliced, diced, interpreted, everything from Freud to a book that I had picked up at an airport once called Moses in Management, where the guy actually took a look at the chapters in the book of Exodus and had Moses as a managerial, a vice president in charge of, HR, how to manage a corporation. If I was home, I'd show you the book. It's called Moses in Management. So, but that's why the texts are so important and so really, really valuable. And Saroni, I'm sure you bumped into this in your life, where people or even in your own life, where it just isn't going to work. Just isn't. The answer is no.
But for me, it was even more than that. I mean, he was yet again excluded from community. So it wasn't just he didn't get what he wanted. So that to me was also, I mean, it's an extension of what you're talking about for sure.
Yeah.
Even if you follow all of the rules and do everything you were told to do by God. So far as God, yeah, he just, yet again, he was prohibited from taking that final step.
And part of that, you could wave it another way as the challenge of leadership. Because once you step into being a leader, are you the role model? Are you one of the crowd? And the answer is, well, not necessarily anymore. We have this conversation all the time with students. When you're going to be ordained a rabbi, you're going in with your congregation. You're not just like one of your congregants. You're not. We had a professor once, Dr. Jacob Ritter Marcus of blessed memory, one of the great Jewish historians, and he gave a lecture at the end of the class on Jewish history. And he basically said, this was in the 60s when everybody was supposed to be relevant, He says, some of you going on with congregation, and here's the truth. You can't be best friends with anybody in your congregation. And we all said, no, we're going to, he said, and the reason for that is because you're never going to be totally part of the community like members of your congregations, because some of these people who you want to be best friends, you're going to have to bury them. You may have to marry them. You may have to counsel them and disagree with what they're doing or try to guide them, not as a friend, but as a spiritual leader. That's different. And of course, we all said, no, we're going to be the different generation. And within a couple of years, when we talked to each other, we say, that Dr. Marcus was right. And it happened to everybody. It happened to the first time it happened to me in my first congregation. I got best friends. We were really good friends with the Michelman family. My first congregation, they had a boat. They took us on the boat. We were invited for dinner, all this other stuff, until something came up at the temple. And they said, well, we need you to, you're the assistant rabbi, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't support that. It's like, so that's why these texts are they're very personal. Once you walk through the door and saying, okay, let me have that text speak to me. And
I just want,
yeah.
I just want to say before you got too far away, it's interesting that you mentioned Rabbi Marcus, because Ron and Randy would both know that, he was a rabbi here at this temple.
Yeah, I know.
For a while. So anyway.
He was one of the great scholars, rabbis, teachers, whatever.
So I've heard, yeah.
Oh no, he was he would come to class, and there was a group, and when I was at HUC, who from that old German tradition. They would walk into class in a three-piece suit with the watch fob, and they stood on that platform, elevated platform in these classrooms, and those days are also gone. To the detriment, by the way, because I thought you lose a little bit of respect if everybody walks around in chinos and a golf shirt. And I'm not being facetious at all. I believe that. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Anybody else want to comment on who those? Okay, Yashim, por favor.
I don't know if I'm commenting on the same thread, but I wanted to say basically, I've always thought of that final no as being pushed to do the most selfless spiritual act, which is to pass on the struggle, pass on the knowledge, pass on the glory even to the next generation, to the next leader. And at the same time, personally, in letting go of your own, sort of hopes for yourself, what you are, it's like, it reminds me, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. I guess everybody that it's not a perfect, it's not a perfect relationship or a perfect union. It's asking, the person to sacrifice even more, because spiritually you gain more from that, also that letting go of your own self, your own self-ambition. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like just pushing it up one more notch up the spiritual development
Oh, no. Look,
process.
the commentaries on the mitzvah, the idea of doing a mitzvah.
Yeah.
And there's literature to support this in the human relations field, that when you give of yourself, the reward that you get back from doing the mitzvah is greater than the person receiving the mitzvah.
That's right.
And so the whole mitzvah system, as we used to call it, is designed around this in many ways. That you,
Mhm.
it is not. So it's not just you're following the command of a God. You're really actually building. Goes back to, okay, like what Ron was saying before. It goes back to community, because how do you build a community? You build that community by interacting, by doing for others. You can't build it. That's why you can't be Jewish alone, because you can't be isolated. You have to have community. You have to have other people. So when I have my theology of relationships, it's exactly what you're talking about. So the legacy thing, look, so Roni was talking about Moses not getting into the promised land, but one of the challenges of the last sermon in Deuteronomy is the transfer of power.
Yes.
The peaceful transfer of power, which is a phrase we'll probably hear again in another 8 months. The idea that Joshua is, okay, it's Joshua's turn now.
Yeah.
It's up to him now. Okay. And initially, Moses fights it, but eventually this is part of the legacy. And remember, we pray for legacy every single service.
Yeah.
First paragraph of the Amidah. And you whether you in a liberal synagogue where the matriarchs and patriarchs are mentioned, one of the interpretations, I think we talked about this last month, is that it's really an understanding that part of our job as a human being and as a Jew is to make sure we pass on something to the next generation. Go to Deuteronomy 30:19, one of the great verses in Torah. 30:19 is Uvacharta Chaim, therefore choose life. But the B part of the verse, the part of the verse that we never teach you, which is more important, why do you make choices that sanctify life? So that the people who come after you will be blessed.
That's right.
That's why. Not so you'll feel good, but so that you're part of something greater than yourself. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 1. It's a beautiful chapter. It'll take you 1.5 minutes to read it. Go read Ecclesiastes chapter 1 with this. It's the Ernest Hemingway chapter. You'll see that this image of we're part of the river that flows into the ocean, that we're part of something greater. Well, so Yashim, if we teach people that it's not about you, that you're part of something much greater than you, goes back to the Shabbat thing, okay? It's not about collecting material things so that I can be more important than you are, because in the end, we're all going to die. So it doesn't make any difference. But if we can start teaching children at a very early age, you're part of something greater than yourself. You'll find meaning in the mitzvah. You'll find meaning, as Ron alluded to, in the creation and being part of a community. You will find meaning and purpose for your life by being in relationship with other people, because you are part of something greater. And that that's why I love the construction metaphor in this Torah portion, because we're a product of everything that came before us. Everything. And so our responsibility, says Torah, is to make sure that the people who come after us are also able to build on all the things that we've done. And that's part of memory. Right? Why is Kaddish memory so important in Jewish tradition? That's our eternal life. That's how we live forever. It's all tied together like a construction. It all fits together. And if you take one piece of those essential construction pieces away, what happens? The building falls down. Same with us.
Rabbi,
Yeah, who's talking? I can't.
it's
tell.
Neil.
Neil, go
Sorry,
ahead.
if I could be so, I don't know, whatever bold is to say, isn't that what you're referring to right now? This is what we're doing. I mean, we're from around the country and focusing on keeping this one building, which used to have, still has its own community, and we're part of that community. So we're a community holding on to something for the next
Exactly right.
generation, because that's
Exactly right.
because that building doesn't belong to any one of us. It belongs to that town, to that community, and to the Jews that will be there at some
Exactly
point.
right. So when you have your celebration next couple of weeks from now on the 23rd,
Yes,
whoever's going to be speaking or anything, really, that's, Neil, exactly what you're talking about. This was built by people for a community. And so like Ron was talking about, this community helped build who I am. It's right out of this Torah portion. That's why I wanted to raise this metaphor with you today. And we're going to pass this on. Remember that movie, Paying It Forward?
Right.
So 50 years from now, when people will still come to this building, and who knows, 50 years from now, there'll be people moving there, Jews moving there. Who knows? You don't know anymore. That's part of this continual circle and cycle. First of all, Jewish history. Because if you step back to 30,000 feet and look at Jewish history itself, it's a story of change. It's a story of growth. It's a story of adaptation and sometimes radical innovation. Because change is part of who we are as a Jew, no matter how old we are. Never stop growing. Never stop growing. So it all fits together like in this image of this Torah portion. This is why once you get off people say, oh, it's just a very dry Torah portion. It's about constructing a building that doesn't exist anymore. They no. It's what you think it is but it's really about what we construct for ourselves. What kind of us do we construct, and who made it possible? Community, teachers. There's probably some of you had an event in your life then when you look back, it says, well, you know, as a result of that event, my life changed. My life changed. I didn't think the way I thought anymore. So we have just 10, this ends at 1 o'clock, or my 1 o'clock, right? It
Uh,
ends at,
it-
okay, because there's one more thing I want to raise with you just to throw
Whenever
out.
everybody needs it to end,
No. I want
That's
to be
fine.
respectful of your time.
that's fine.
So in the next part of this Torah, I'm going to throw this other thing. This is another interesting phrase in the text. In this chapter, which is 35, the next paragraph right out of Shabbat, Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, this is what the Lord commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Lord, everyone whose heart so moves him. Whose heart so moves him. Where am I? I'm losing my own place. The thing that I want to raise with you is this very, very interesting phrase, which appears last week before, and this week. What is it? How do you interpret whose heart so moves him? Does that mean the people whose heart isn't moved by this community say, forget about it? I'm not moved to write a check to the synagogue. I'm not moved to how do you interpret whose heart so moved him? And the follow-up is, how do you move somebody's heart? What does it mean? Because the text says not everybody. There are other texts that says everybody's supposed to give a half shekel, but this is everybody whose heart so moved him. What does that mean? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Or is Moses excluding some of the community?
I think being moved to something and taking action, are not always in the same realm. And so you could be moved to something, and you could be moved for years even. And at some point, take another step, take a deeper step. I don't know. Maybe I'm
No, it's
misreading it.
I know. This is why I wanted to, because we're in a very, very precarious position right now in the American Jewish community. We're trying to get people's hearts to be moved. And the other part of the discussion here in the text has the phrase "chacham lev," wise heart. What does it mean to have a heart of wisdom? Heart of wisdom, because the heart is the center of. It's where the emotions come from. It's where the feelings come from. How do you motivate people to have a wise heart? And Yashim and Donna alluded to what's going on in the Middle East. Many people's hearts are being moved, perhaps in different directions vis-a-vis Israel right now. And by the way, it's splitting the American Jewish community almost in half. Almost in half. So what does it mean to you? Yeah, Christo, Bavakasha.
This is not to detract anything from any rabbis, but my synagogue recently switched over to Mishkan Tefillah.
Right.
I love this quote. It says, "We need Jewish men and women to become a Jewishly inspired and informed leadership, not only rabbinical, but also laity. We need Jews more conversant with the thought and teachings of our Judaism, to whom Judaism is no cold, remote theology, and Hebrew learning not a matter of some mystical ignorance, and to whom Jewish life is no proxied culture. We need a reassertion of our faith and a reawakening of interest in a cultural heritage that has all too quickly been relegated to the exclusive possession of graduates of our rabbinical seminaries.
Amen.
We desperately need lay leaders today. I'm going to add to this, to work with our rabbis as a team with such vision and fortitude. That's why I'm very supportive of rabbis as a lay leader, not to detract from the rabbinics, but we
No.
work with our rabbis, not have them do everything for us. We need to help our rabbis too.
Look, Krista, what you just read from Mishkan is the subject of every rabbinic conversation. Okay? One of the challenges that we face right now is there's this really growing in knowledge divide. And by the way, parenthetically, because my Jewish Sacred Aging program deals with predominantly the AARP crowd, it's this crowd right now in the contemporary American Jewish community that is driving the demand for real solid adult education, not fairy stories and bubble mices and miracle stories, but I need to know what the hell is going on. Just like Saroni, her question, why? What can Judaism tell me about this diagnosis? How am I dealing with the loss of various parts of my ability to think? My spouse who has ongoing dementia, the fact that I'm alone, the fact that I want to get whatever. And one of the challenges is we're seeing real challenges, and you may not like this, but I will tell you that I believe, and many of my colleagues see this as also, that in many cases, congregations, in an attempt to get human beings in, have dumbed down things. With the idea that if you get people in the building or on the Zoom machine, then you can then get them more interested in their and get their heart more motivated. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it just becomes what I call performance Judaism. And you dumb things down so much that there's no there. And one of the other challenges that we have is in the whole Jewish education phenomena, which is changing, because the majority of synagogue religious education programs are designed for one thing. They teach to the test. Have a nice bar or bat mitzvah. And so, and we're living the results of that in our high school programming, because now we're turning out kids from confirmation and post-confirmation class or high school who, when they go to Harvard or Brandeis or Boulder, Colorado, or Stanford or Emory or University of Georgia, and meet the non-Jews or the Palestinians, and they are confronted with this, they have no vocabulary to talk about. And so this is all part. So your sense in that paragraph is 1,000,000% right on. And I don't know of a colleague who, when confronted with interested lay people who say, we want to work with you to create this type of intellectually challenging, heart-inspiring community, and worship is only part of it. Because we could do a whole hours and hours on worship. Okay. And maybe for another class. But you're absolutely right, Christo. You're absolutely right. And it's a real interesting challenge that's happening, right? And we're literally in the process of just living this.
Well, the quote's from Laura Ackerman, so I'm sorry I didn't credit her properly.
Yeah. Okay. It's always good to give a correct approbation.
Christo, if you could forward that portion to me, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay.
Put on the website or something.
Yes, Saroni, go ahead. Last one.
I just wanted to say, when you read that, there's kind of a dualistic way whose heart was moved. In 2024, like you were talking about, our attention spans are so short. The onus then becomes on the leadership to move the congregation to be able to act. So in that sense, there's a very selfish interpretation of that, of like, I'm just waiting here to be moved, and until you move me, I'm not going to do anything. But then
Yeah,
the
well-
flip side of that is, if you're eternally, intrinsically your own heart, I mean, how much more personal can you get than your own heart? What actually moves you? Does it have to be the glitz and the glam of this, what was just constructed, or is it something that comes more quietly within you to be able to move you to do whatever that act is? So there's kind of that dualistic interpretation of that particular quote.
And I would say that in my experience with our work in Jewish sacred aging, and I just saw this again at this conference this week, I get more of what you're talking about from older adults who don't expect, who want to search and find answers and find meaning, and are more motivated, self-motivated, of saying, I need the great scholar, I need the great event, but now I need to search for myself. I'm finding more and more and more of that. Partly because we're living in a society right now, with a dearth of those inspirational theological leaders. We don't have that many of them. A lot of the people who have national platforms have become so politicized that kind of loses the message. This is why this stuff is so, it's right out of the headline. All this stuff is we're living this right now. We are living it. Anyway, it's Donna, go ahead real fast.
Really, really fast. And I'm just gonna wrap up everything you said because it all connects. And I think one is the experience that you have behind you, what motivates your heart, the experience you had and how you evaluate that. And of course, your rabbis and your community and your people around you all have to help you with that. And so that's why the older folks know more how to be motivated through their heart because they've had all this wonderful training behind us. I know 2 places where that's happened to me. Nobody said anything to me. One is Temple Aaron. In my heart, I just got this little paper and it said, support us. And I just knew that's what I was supposed to do. Nobody told me I had to. And the second one was another one is my synagogue. We were meeting in warehouses and things, and they finally found some property. And then something in my heart just said, you know what? I want you to help out with that. It just came out. I mean, nobody pushed you, no rabbi, no nothing. It was, I think, just the motivation of the Holy Spirit inside, the Spirit of God working in you. And he just said, you know, this is what your legacy is. You need to be a part of this. And it's inside you, just know you need to be a part of it.
Well, Donna, you just encapsulated that whole phrase of whose heart so moves them. So it's a great way to end. So thank you very much. Everybody, you just take care of yourself, stay safe, stay healthy. I think my next time with you is in May. So be
Rabbi,
well.
I want to thank you for being here. Thank each of you for being here. It means a whole world to this community. And this community means a lot more than meets the ear or the eye. And, you know, there's 10 of us here and anymore, so many places I go to, people are, oh yeah, I've heard about Temple Aaron. So please keep the word out there to your friends and neighbors, anybody. And I know I'll be seeing some of you on the 23rd. Hopefully more of you will be there. Look forward to seeing you all. Rabbi, thank you again, everybody.
You take care.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Shalom.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi. You really
My
moved
pleasure.
us. Thank
Take
you.
care.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was a good
Oh,
session.